Hello, everyone. Welcome to Be Your Own Hero. My name is Mark Kageyama, and I'm a stage 4 prostate, bone, and lung cancer patient. Been battling cancer for over 2 years now, and I'd like to welcome everybody to my channel, To Be Your Own Hero. Please like, subscribe, make a comment in the comments section, and thank you so much for joining us today. And I'd like to talk about a few things first. I had a very, very profound call just before Christmas, and it was with a gentleman named Mitch Waltha. And Mitch, I interviewed him earlier in 2022, and he called me out of the blue, and I looked at my phone, and I thought, that's interesting, and I answered it, and Mitch came on the phone and said, hey, how are you? Merry Christmas and all that. And he said, I just wanted to share something with you. And I said, what's that, Mitch? And he said, I wanted to thank you for interviewing me on your channel because it's changed my life. And I said, oh, how is that, Mitch? And he said, well, in this past year, I've lost 50 pounds. I've never felt better. And I really appreciate, you interviewing me. And in addition, he said, I have not gone to the ER, the emergency room at all this year, which I've gone every year for decades. And he said, it's just been amazing. I feel so much better. So thank you so much. And I had to take a step back and think about that for a bit. I mean, I knew it was really profound. And it took me back to when I started my YouTube channel, To Be Your Own Hero. I just wanted to help one person. And to have it come back in that way was just special. It was really humbling, and it was an honor to hear that. So thank you so much, Mitch. And we'll have to interview you again as a follow-up. But anyway, welcome, everybody. And I'd like to introduce my guest here, and his name is Terry Tucker, and he's got a fantastic story. So Terry, please introduce yourself and say hello to everyone.
Well, Mark, thanks for having me on. I'm really looking forward to talking with you. My name is Terry Tucker. I live in Denver, Colorado. I've been battling cancer for the last 10 years. It is a rare form of melanoma that appeared on the bottom of my foot. Before all that fun and frivolity started, I was a NCAA Division I college basketball player. You can't tell this from my voice or from looking at me, but I am 6'8" tall. When I graduated from college, I'm really going to date myself now, Mark, but this was long before the internet was available to help people find a job. So I moved home to find that first job. Fortunately, I did that. I found the first job in the corporate headquarters of Wendy's International, the hamburger chain, in their marketing department. That was the good news. The bad news was that I spent the next 3.5 years living at home, helping my mother care for my father and my grandmother, who were both dying of different forms of cancer. Professionally, as I said, started out at Wendy's, then spent some time as a hospital administrator, then made a huge pivot in my life and became a police officer. And part of what I did during that time was I was a SWAT team hostage negotiator. After my law enforcement career, I started a school security consulting business. I coached girls' high school basketball, made the brilliant business decision to start a motivational speaking business right in the middle of COVID, and became an author in 2020. And then finally, my wife and I have been married for almost 30 years. We have one child, a daughter, who's a graduate of the United States Air Force Academy and is an officer in the new branch of the military, the Space Force.
Wow. My son-in-law is in the Air Force as well. So hello, Matt. Thank you for your service, and thanks to your daughter as well. So that's fantastic. So absolutely. Why don't we get into it? So I can't wait to hear your story. So how did your cancer journey start?
So I mentioned I was a girls' high school basketball coach when we lived in Texas. I had a callus break open on the bottom of my foot, right below my third toe. And initially, I didn't think much of it because as a coach, you're on your feet a lot. But after a couple of weeks of it not healing, I made an appointment to go see a podiatrist, foot doctor friend of mine. And he took an x-ray and he said, Terry, I think you have a little cyst in there and I can cut it out. And he did. And he showed it to me. It was just a little gelatin sac with some white fat in it. No dark spots, no blood, nothing that gave either one of us concern. But fortunately or unfortunately, he sent it off to pathology to have it looked at. 2 weeks later, I received a call from him. And as I said, he was a friend of mine. And the more difficulty he was having explaining to me what was going on, the more frightened I was becoming. Until finally, he just laid it out for me. He said, Terry, I've been a doctor for 25 years. I have never seen this form of cancer. You have an incredibly rare form of melanoma. Most people think of melanoma as too much exposure to the sun, and it affects the melanin, the pigment in our skin. This is a rare form that appears on the bottom of the feet or the palms of the hands, has absolutely nothing to do with sun exposure or anything like that. And he said, because your cancer is so rare, he recommended I go to MD Anderson Cancer Center in Houston and be treated. And so I did. And at the time, melanoma was pretty much a death sentence. There really were not a whole lot of treatments or drugs that they could give you to either retard it or to kill it. So I ended up having the bottom of my foot excised, had all the lymph nodes in my groin removed. And then when I healed, my oncologist put me on a weekly injection of a drug called interferon to help keep the disease from coming back. The side effects of the interferon, at least for me, were that I had severe flu-like symptoms for 2 to 3 days every week after each injection. And I took those weekly injections for almost 5 years. So imagine having the flu every week for 5 years. And as I said, that wasn't a cure. That was, as my oncologist used to say, we're trying to kick the can down the road. I took interferon for 5 years until it became so toxic to my body that I ended up in the intensive care unit with a fever of 108 degrees, which is usually not compatible with being alive. Fortunately, I presented at a level 1 trauma center and they were able to stabilize me. So I had to stop taking it. And almost immediately, the cancer came back in the exact same spot on my foot where it had presented 5 years earlier. That necessitated the amputation of my left foot in 2018. Cancer worked its way up my leg, 2 more surgeries in 2019. And then in 2020, an undiagnosed tumor kind of in my ankle area grew large enough that it fractured my tibia, my shin bone. And my only recourse right in the middle of the pandemic was to have my left leg amputated above the knee. And I also found out I had tumors in my lungs, which I'm currently being treated for. And on that uplifting story,
what I want to point out here is, what exactly happened with you here. And yet you have a big smile on your face and you're so pleasant to talk to. You've had both from, please describe where you got amputated again from the knee down on one leg. And
so initially, my first amputation was my foot because the cancer, came back in the exact same place. They tried a few drug therapies and they were not successful. So I ended up having my leg amputated. Excuse me. And then I found out that, I had my entire lower leg was full of cancer. So in 2020, I had my leg amputated above my knee. So I have an above the knee amputation. And that's also the time I found out I had tumors in my lungs, and I'm still being treated for those tumors today.
So when you got the amputations, what's going through your mind? What is your, I mean, that's gotta be, that's absolutely life altering. So what's going on through your mind specifically?
Yeah, I mean, the foot amputation was, okay, I've got to, use these devices to learn how to walk again. And I did. And I was always an athletic person. Like I said, I played college basketball and had stayed athletic in law enforcement and things like that. And so I still wanted to maintain that level of fitness. So I worked with a physical therapist, and he got me walking again, which was not easy. But then when I had my leg amputated, that was huge. I mean, especially, I mean, just the whole thing. I mean, it was right in the middle of COVID. I mean, I'm having my leg amputated. My doctor was like, "Look, we're gonna amputate it at a remote hospital." It was still part of the University of Colorado hospital system, but this hospital did not take COVID patients. He said, "So we're gonna do it there. They have all the tools and the techniques and everything we need to do it. It's safely, so it's not like we're sacrificing safety." He said, "But you should be in the hospital for a week on this type of amputation. You're only going to be in for 48 hours." So my wife literally dropped me off at the hospital. A nurse came out, put me in a wheelchair, wheeled me back to the pre-op area. There was nobody there. I mean, there's probably 40 cubicles. There was nobody there but me and this nurse. They prepped me for surgery. They did the surgery. My wife was like, "What do I do?" I said, "Just stay in the parking lot and pray. And when the doctor's finished, he'll call you." And he did. And she was not allowed to come in and see me. She was not allowed to go to the room with me. I was in the hospital for 48 hours, and boom, I was out and home. And so it's been an entirely, having a below the knee amputation and having an above the knee amputation is like night and day. And I worked very hard to use a prosthetic leg to walk my daughter down the aisle about a year ago, and was very happy about that, but really haven't spent a lot of time with the prosthetic since. It's very cumbersome. It takes a lot of energy because now I'm walking with basically my hip and my butt muscles to propel me forward, because basically your upper leg, its whole role is to move your lower leg. And when you don't have a lower leg, all those muscles atrophy because there's nothing for them to do. And that, so it's been difficult, but it's also, I like the challenge. It's like, okay, how am I going to rework my life now so that I'm still productive, I'm still positive, I'm still living some type of a purpose?
How did you maintain that positivity through all of this? Because I mean, 99.9% of the people out there would be feeling so sorry for themselves. How did you avoid that?
Well, I don't, to be honest with you. I don't want to sit here and make your listeners think that, I mean, you're looking at me, there's no S on my chest. I don't have a cape and fly around with magical powers or anything like that. I have those bad days. I have days where I cry. I have days where I get down. I have days where I feel sorry for myself. And a couple things help me with that. One, I have a friend that actually my wife works with who calls me on my off weeks of treatment. I'm treated every 3 weeks at the hospital for the tumors in my lungs. And he'll call, and he's a former Navy SEAL. And so we'll talk about what the SEALs call their 40% rule, which basically says that, if you're done, if you're at the end of your rope, if you just don't think you can go on anymore, that you're only at 40% of your maximum, and you still have another 60% left in reserve to give to yourself. So that's one thing that I always remember when I get in those places. And the other thing that I remember is that I'm on a clinical trial drug now that more than likely is not going to save my life, but may save the life of somebody, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, based on all the data that the doctors are gleaning from my blood tests and my scans and things like that. And I think one of the things that team sports taught me, and for me, it was just team sports. I think it can be whatever team you're on, your family, your colleagues at work, whatever team you're on, is the importance of being part of something that's bigger than yourself. You realize on a team that if you don't do your job, not only do you let yourself down, but you let your teammates down, your coaches down, your fans down, etc. And if you think about it, the biggest team game that we all play is this game of life.
Well said, beautifully said. I love the way that you articulated that. So thank you. I mean, that is absolutely fantastic. And I think the less, I mean, I'm so honored and humbled that you are speaking with me today, because it's a fantastic story that people need to hear. I mean, the people such as you are the true heroes, and it's not the celebrities, and it's not the sports people and all that most people revere. It's the real life heroes that overcome that, to me, are the true heroes. And your story such as yours, people need to hear it, because that is, you can give so many people hope. And I hope people watch this and really grasp what you're saying here. So thank you so much, Terry. And I really appreciate you sharing this time with me. So keep going. I want to hear more.
I don't know. There are so many different stories I could tell. I had a nurse recently ask me, what was it like to have your foot amputated and to have your leg amputated? And, I explained to her just what I said to you. It certainly hasn't been easy. Still working on having a quality of life where I can walk. But what I told her was that, cancer can take all my physical faculties, but cancer can't touch my mind, cancer can't touch my heart, and cancer can't touch my soul. And that's who I am. That's who you are, Mark. That's who everybody who's listening to us really is. And we spend a lot of time, especially when we're going through cancer, if we take chemotherapy, we lose our hair, our skin gets blotchy, we're tired, all the ugliness that we know that these drugs cause in our lives. But is my hair, do I need a wig? We spend a lot of time on our physical appearance. And I guess what I've learned is, our heart, our mind, and our soul are really who we are. This is just a vessel or a house to house who we really are. So I'm not saying, don't get a wig, don't do things that make you feel better, don't do things that make you, look better and have a better feeling about yourself. I'm not telling you not to do that. If that's what you feel is important, then by all means do that. But also spend some time working on your heart, your mind, and your soul, because that's really who you are. This is, like you talked about celebrities and athletes and things like that, and oh, they're beautiful, and oh, they're strong, and all that kind of stuff. But you know what? They have the same fears. They have the same concerns that we all did. I did a podcast about 2 months ago with a former NFL lineman. This guy is 6'6", 300 pounds. I mean, he put his forearm up on the table. His forearm blocked out the camera. I mean, this guy was huge. And we were talking after the podcast, and I told him, I said, when I started doing podcasts, I said, I was terrible. I didn't have good stories. The stories weren't concise and things like that. He's like, really, Terry? He said, when I started my podcast, I was scared to death that nobody would listen to me. And I'm thinking, here's this guy that could break me like a twig. And he was scared. He was nervous. So we all get that way. Don't think that, that those people or whoever you feel, you emulate is somebody that's important, that they're better than me. They're not any better than you. They're not. I don't care who you are. I don't care what you do for a living. I don't care what you do. We are all in this together. And I'll end this with one more quick story. Another nurse. That's all I got is like basketball nurse stories. So another nurse. She was like, when I first met her, she was about 25 years old. She was already a nurse, but she was learning the ins and outs of the unit where I get treated for my infusions. And about 8 months later, she was taking care of me by herself. And she came in one time and she said, Terry, I got a story I want to tell you, but I'm not sure if I can. And I didn't know how to respond to that. What do you say to that? And I said, well, it sounds like it might be a good story. I'd love to hear it if you feel that you want to tell me. So she's in and out, giving me the drugs and stuff like that. And then about 2 hours later, she comes in, sits down on the bed. She's like, all right, here's the story. She's like, when I first met you, I was going to get out of nursing. She said, I was in a really dark place. I'd had a good friend of mine die. I talked to my parents. I was going to get out of nursing and I was going to go to work for Amazon. And she said, then I met you and I see what you go through every single day. I see how bad the reactions are to your drug. And I went back and I started to read your history and everything you've gone through. And she said, and I knew I was where I was supposed to be. Now, if she would have never told me that story, I would have had no idea that my life had a positive impact on her. So all of those people who are listening to us, all those people who suffer every single day, don't think that suffering is for naught. Don't think that you're in a position where nobody cares, nobody's watching. I'm guarantee you there are people that would give anything they have just to walk 5 minutes in your shoes. And John Wooden, the former basketball coach at UCLA, I was a big fan when I was growing up, he had a saying that went like this: a careful person I want to be, a little person follows me. I dare not go astray for fear they may go the same way. So realize that what you're going through, people are watching you. They're watching how you handle it with whatever grace and dignity you can muster to handle it. So don't think your life is in vain, because I guarantee you there are people watching you and admiring you for what you're going through.
Wow, that so well said, Terry. Thank you. And by the way, I'm a huge John Wooden fan myself. I've read I don't know, a number of his books, and for those of you who aren't familiar with them, John Wooden was the coach of the UCLA Bruins for many years, set record after record with national championships, and he was, you know, every player that he had pretty much revered him and had nothing but great things to say about him, and yeah, he was a special person. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up, and I like the way you're able to recite that quote, because I didn't recall that one, but he had he had his pyramid of success, and so many positive quotes that people to this very day still live by. So that's absolutely fantastic. So I'd like to hear about Terry Tucker, the author. Can you please share with us about that and what you've done and what you've written?
Sure. So I wrote a book called Sustainable Excellence, 10 Principles to Living Your Uncommon and Extraordinary Life. And it was really a book born out of two conversations I had. One was with a former player that I had coached when we lived in Texas, who moved to Colorado with her fiance, where my wife and I live. And the four of us had dinner one night. And I remember saying to her after dinner, I said, I'm really excited that you're living close and I can watch you find and live your purpose. She got real quiet for a while. And she looked at me and she said, well, Coach, what do you think my purpose is? I said, I have absolutely no idea what your purpose is, but that's what your life should be about. Finding the reason you were put on the face of this earth, using your unique gifts and talents and living that reason. So that was one story. And then I had a young man in college who reached out to me on social media, and he asked me what I thought were the most important things that he should learn to not just be successful in his job or in business, but to be successful in life. And I didn't want to give him the, get up early, work hard, help others. Not that those aren't important. Those are incredibly important. But I wanted to see if maybe I could go deeper with him. So I spent some time. I was walking around with a pad of paper and pencil, and I was writing notes. And eventually I had these kind of 10 thoughts, these 10 ideas, these 10 principles. And so I sent them to him. And then I kind of stepped back and I was like, I've got a life story that fits underneath this principle, or I know somebody whose life emulates that principle. So literally during the 3 to 4 months that I was healing after I had my leg amputated and before I started chemotherapy for the tumors in my lungs, I sat down at the computer every day and I built stories, and they're real stories about real people underneath each of the principles. And that's how sustainable excellence came to be.
Do you have a copy of it handy there?
I do.
You want to show us? There we go. Oh, that's awesome. That is awesome. I love that title. Sustainable Excellence. That is beautiful. Did you do the artwork for the cover?
No, I was actually, I got hooked up with a small not-for-profit publishing company that helped me to publish it. So I had access to cover designers, layout artists, all the different, I'm drawing a blank on the word, the individuals who went through the book and here, tighten this up or take that out, or that doesn't make sense. And, obviously I've never had a baby in my life, but this was as close as I'd ever come, to giving birth to something. or editors, that's the word I was looking for. So I had these different editors that went through it and helped me. And so the editors would come back and say, well, you should expand this, or you should take this out. It doesn't make sense, or you should move it. And I was almost to the point where I was indignant. It was like, what, how dare you tell me what to, and I would always say at the end, like, look, let me sleep on it and I'll come back to you tomorrow morning. And I would say, Mark, 99% of the time, I would go back to them and say, you're absolutely right. You are the experts. You know what makes a good book. You know what makes a good publication. And I would make the changes that they would recommend. I was thinking, why am I, involved with these people who are experts when I'm not taking their advice? I mean, that would be like you telling me how to be a policeman or something like that. It's like, what? No, these are the experts. I need to pay attention to them. So yeah, I mean, I got several cover designs and, would take it to the family. What do you think? No, we don't like that. No, that's not, and eventually, with these series of rocks, there's 10 rocks that mimic the 10 principles and that, and it just seemed to fit when they finally suggested it.
What is your favorite chapter about and why?
So each principle is a chapter. And it's always fun for me as the author when people reach out, because there's always one principle that seems to be the one that resonates with the particular reader. And I wrote all 10 of them, but there's also one that resonates with me. And it resonates with me, and I'm not proud to say this because I've done this, and I've done it many times in my life. And the principle, the chapter is titled this: most people think with their fears and their insecurities instead of using their minds. And I know I've done that. I know I've been like, I want to do this. Oh, wait a minute. Maybe I'm not smart enough. Maybe I don't have enough information. What will people say about me, if I fail in this endeavor? That's thinking with our fears and their insecurity. That's not thinking with our minds. And when I do some speaking, especially if it's to a group of younger people, I always tell them, if there's something in your heart, something in your soul that you believe you're supposed to do, but it scares you, go ahead and do it. Because at the end of your life, the things you're going to regret are not going to be the things you did. They're going to be the things you didn't do. And by then it's going to be too late to go back and do them.
Wow, that is beautiful. Terry, I would like to ask you, would you like to come back to do a part 2 with me so we could keep talking about this great stuff?
I would love to, Mark. That would be a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So at this point, what would you like to leave our audience with as a final thought?
Could I tell you another story?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Love stories.
So I've always been a big fan of Westerns growing up. When I was young, my mom and dad used to let me stay up late and watch, Bonanza and Gunsmoke. And my favorite was Wild Wild West. 1993, the movie Tombstone came out. You may have seen it. It was a huge blockbuster. Starred Val Kilmer as a man by the name of John Doc Holliday and Kurt Russell as a man by the name of Wyatt Earp. Now, for those who don't know, Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday were two living, breathing human beings who walked on the face of the earth. They're not made up characters just for the movie. Now, Doc was called Doc because he was a dentist by trade, but pretty much Doc Holliday was a gunslinger and a card shark. And Wyatt Earp had been some form of a lawman almost his entire adult life. And somehow these two men from entirely opposite backgrounds come together and form this very close friendship. And at the end of the movie, Doc Holliday is dying of tuberculosis at a sanitarium in Glenwood Springs, Colorado, which is about 3 hours from where I live. The real Doc Holliday died at that sanitarium, and he's buried in the Glenwood Springs Cemetery. And Wyatt, at this point in his life, is destitute. He has no money, he has no job, he has no prospects for a job. So every day comes to play cards with Doc, and the two men pass the time that way. And in this almost last scene, they're talking about what they want out of life. And Doc says, when I was younger, I was in love with my cousin, but she joined a convent over the affair. But she's all that I ever wanted. And then he looks at Wyatt and he says, what about you, Wyatt? What do you want? And Wyatt kind of nonchalantly says, I just want to lead a normal life. And Doc looks at him and says, there's no normal, there's just life. And get on with living yours. Mark, you and I probably know people. There's probably people out there listening to us that are sitting back and saying, well, when this happens, I'll have a normal life. Or when this arises, I'll have a successful life. Or when that occurs, I'll have a significant life. What I'd like to leave your listeners with is this: don't wait. Don't wait for life to come to you. Get out there, find the reason you were put on the face of this earth, use your unique gifts and talents, and live that reason. Because if you do, at the end of your life, I'm going to promise you two things. Number one, you're going to be a whole lot happier. And number two, you're going to have a whole lot more peace in your heart.
Wow, that is beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that, Terry. And by the way, that I love that movie.
That's a great movie.
That is a great movie. In fact, my favorite scene, one of my favorite scenes, was when Doc Holliday and Wyatt Earp were in that bar and against the bad guys, and Doc Holliday had that little liquor cup. Yep. That he twirled to act like he was going to shoot him or something like that.
Right.
Yeah, that's a great movie. Anybody who hasn't seen that, that's probably the greatest Western ever made. It was phenomenal. But anyway, Terry, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for sharing your knowledge, and thank you for just being a true hero for all of us. And your example is exactly what we like to see on this channel. So thank you so much. And I'd like to thank everyone for joining us here at To Be Your Own Hero. And I'd like to leave everybody with a couple of quotes, which I always like to do. And these are from Roy T. Bennett, The Light in the Heart. And the first one is, start each day with a positive thought and a grateful heart. Start each day on the right foot, in other words. And the second quote is, be grateful for what you already have while you pursue your goals. If you aren't grateful for what you already have, what makes you think you'll be happy with more? And with that, I would like to leave everybody with those. And, like I always say, make the most out of every single day. Be happy and appreciate life. Our lives are so short. I mean, in the blink of an eye, blocks of time are just gone. Look what happened to this past year, 2022. In the blink of an eye, it was gone. And we're entering 2023, and make the most out of your time here. And when you do that, time goes by extremely fast. I mean, every single day, I'm so happy to open my eyes, and I'm so blessed and so thankful to God that I have that time, and hopefully you do too, and make the most out of every single little bit of time, every single breath. And thank you so much for joining us at To Be Your Own Hero. And we'll see you next time. But please subscribe, like, and make a comment in the comment section of the video. And we will see you again next week. And also we'll bring Terry back for part 2. So thank you very much and have a great week.